Okay, good morning, everyone. The early birds, good to see you made it. We've coordinated ourselves with the non-glasses wearers on the outside and the short-sighted ones on the inside. I know, sorry, I didn't get the right socks either. We're grateful to have this panel in a morning session, not the graveyard shift, because property management, I think I speak for all the big agencies on the continent, is no doubt the biggest driver of their businesses. And yet, we don't really pay it a lot of attention. And I think there's probably a lack of understanding around really what property management is. So hence, this is a timely panel because we're seeing a real shift in property management on the continent. If we look from maybe the 1990s, where we had economic liberalization and the growth of private capital investment into real estate, we started to see property management evolve. A lot was in-house, some was outsourced, but I think it's fair to say that historically it's been more seen as caretaking, collecting rent and doing the very basics on a building, and a lot of people would perceive it as not adding value. But this is where the shift's happening, and this is what our discussion is going to be about today. I'm joined on the panel by Hooman, who's a director at Greenhills Investments and Century City Properties. Ilze, who's the head of property management for CBRE Excellerate Africa. And Philip, who's wearing two hats. He's an associate director of Knight Frank, but also he's the chairman of the RICS Matrix committee. RICS Matrix is the students and newly qualified professionals, and it's a support network that's provided for them. So thanks for joining. I think we'll kick this straight off with Ilze. Ladies first, Ilze, and let's go straight back to the beginning. And what is property management? As to help us all understand really what is property management. And then secondly, how do you approach it as the head of property management for CBRE?
Thanks, Ryan. I really appreciate that question. Property management is basically where we are appointed on behalf of the owner to take care of their property. We do this from the start to the beginning. So this involves us really screening and placing tenants, billing those tenants, collecting rental from the tenants, and then making sure that we allocate those receipts accordingly into the financials. We also make sure that we manage the property in terms of operational activities, ensuring that all soft and hard services are implemented. We select the suppliers, we screen the suppliers, we manage the suppliers, and all of this we do on behalf of the owner as an agent-principal relationship. So after doing that, we then report to the owners or the asset management team on a full set of management reporting. This reporting includes financials. How is the asset actually performing against budget? We explain the variances where we've maybe missed the mark on income versus expenses, actual versus budget. We also provide them with forecasting, forward-looking at what is actually going to happen till the end of the financial year based on the actuals up until a certain period, and then providing a rolling forecast to the end of the financial year. So that, in short, is what property management is about. I could sit here for another 30 minutes and explain everything in detail because it's actually a very labor-intensive operation.
Okay, thanks, Ilze. And I think we'll give the opportunity to ask questions towards the end of this. So if you have any, please be ready for that. Hooman, I'm going to come to you now. And obviously, you are both a developer and owner-operator of retail, hospitality, residential assets. You've probably seen an interesting shift in property management over the last 15, 20 years. I think we're keen to hear what you've noticed.
Thanks, Ryan. So I think my experience is that property management more recently, the evolution has really happened in the movement away from just keeping the lights on and paying suppliers and handling complaints to actually treating the building as an operating business. And what I mean is that we realize that a mall, a hotel, even a residential complex, they have customers. They have brand standards. They have benchmarks. And so we transform, or we've changed our mentality to looking at performance management more than just paying suppliers and keeping the lights on. I think a lot of my experience and seeing the evolution has come from management of hospitality, because you get direct feedback when you're operating a hotel on your management standards. So if you have poor management, you'll find out about it within the same day, or you'll get a review within the same week. And that was very different from kind of end of year reports from tenants. So what we've seen is the shift really from managing property to managing value. That's really the direction that we've been going in over the last few years. Huge part being played by data and how we use data, how we capture data, how we focus on the customer experience, customer journey. We actually have to ask questions like, how is the tenant performing? What is the customer's experience with your brand? How are you being competitive with from that customer experience point of view? And so it's evolved to less reactive and a lot more of a strategic play now when we're moving into managed properties.
Thanks, Hooman. Philip, wearing your valuations hat first off, when you're valuing assets, do you look carefully at the management of the assets and how that's done, and what impact would that have on the valuation? I think that's my first question, and then we'll come back to part B on that.
Thank you. Yes, we do have a critical review of the management of a particular property because when carrying out valuations, especially for income-generating assets, we are very much concerned about the net cash flows. And for you to achieve the best result at the bottom line, it is as a result of aggregated correct decisions right from the onset, some of which I could highlight. At the point of handover, your PM needs to ensure that even during the snagging period that everything is as was envisioned in the contract with the development team, so that you do not have outflows in terms of capex later on that impact the bottom line. Secondly, as you do your tenant selection, your PM, as she said, comes in critical to ensure you have the right tenant mix, especially in retail developments, so that there is proper circulation within the whole development, and the anchors, sub-anchors sort of help the footfall circulate evenly within the complex, and that benefits the smaller retailers, what we call the line shops. Alongside with that, they help screen your tenants so that you have tenants who are of a good covenant strength. You don't want people who come in and they struggle to meet their rent obligations. On the legal end, if I could touch on that, your PM ensures that you're ticking off all the boxes. You have leases in place so that you do not have what we call controlled tenants in your property, which can be very problematic, especially in this Kenyan market. Number two, they ensure that the law is followed. It's at least 5 years, 1 month in the Kenyan context. You do not have break clauses that, again, negate the need of having a lease because they introduce a controlled tenancy sort of a situation. And also, in the event of a dispute, and they do arise quite often, they build in that lease alternative dispute resolution as the go-to method to solving issues. So all that defends the bottom line and helps you maintain or even improve the value of the property. So when I go to site, I am keen to check whether all the tenants in your building have leases. Number one, are the leases registered? Number two, number three, how are you handling those that are coming up for renewal? Because I want to avoid a situation where there are voids between the current term and the next term, and therefore a decline in net income that take in consideration in my discounted cash flow method. Also looking at the maintenance of the particular building, the fabric of the building, so that I am convinced that you are not going to get outflows that are outside of normal routine maintenance. Huge capital expenditures will impact the net cash flows, will dip the value of the building. So to mention but a few.
Thanks, Philip. I think it's quite interesting historically when you look at PM, because maybe there's been a slight lack of value add, or the perception of a lack of value add, and as a result there's been a huge amount of done in-house, and maybe that's the transition we're starting to see, is there's more institutionalization of real estate, stakeholders that are demanding professionalism. So it is a real shift that we see is happening. Ilze, I'm going to come to you and ask why, if I own an asset here in Nairobi, why should I outsource the property management? Why can't I do it myself, or why shouldn't I do it myself?
Okay, so obviously we all know by now that property management is labor intensive. So by outsourcing your property management to a professional firm, and especially in our case, what we do is we like to sit down with the owners or the asset management team and come up with a master plan for the asset, regardless of the class. That master plan for the asset includes many strategies that we end up pulling them together and run as the strategy for that asset. So those strategies include brand management, because without an identity of an asset, it doesn't matter what class, you don't know what to do with that asset. So we work very closely with the marketing teams of the asset manager or the owner. We come up with a brand management strategy. Once we do that, we assist them with tenant mix strategies, leasing strategies, and that leasing strategy does not just include how we're going to lease, when we're going to lease. It also includes us looking at the actual lease agreement that was set up by the attorneys, so that we can help mitigate any risks in terms of clauses that's perhaps missing in that lease agreement. So we pull together these strategies and we come up with a master development plan for the asset. Very importantly, at the early stages of a development, or even if we take on a building that's already been run by a previous property management company or self-managed, is we look at the budgeting process. Service charges is hugely neglected, in my opinion. So we really look at service charges, what can be included and what cannot be included, and then making sure that we are compliant in terms of the laws and regulations in country for service charges. So for that reason, I believe it's very important to outsource property management so that we can maximize your return on investment and you as owner can focus on your core business.
Thanks, Ilze. And I think one thing we've noticed with service charges is often it's a number plucked. We will charge 25 or 35 shillings per square foot without doing zero-based budgets from the ground up, without doing audits, annual audits, which is a statutory obligation that you should be doing annual audits. So as tenants, tenants should be aware that these audits should be happening and they're getting value. Service charge cannot be a profit center. And I think that's where there's a misconception here in the market. Hooman, if we flip the coin, you're on the other side. And over the last number of years, you've built up your internal teams, which, has to be said, they're working well. You have, in your retail, you have, people looking to get in that can't get in, so it's a sign of the way you're managing it. Why have you done it in-house, and what's your experience been?
Yeah, we've opted to maintain an in-house operation, partly because as developers, you get direct interaction with the consumer, and the feedback loop is very quick, and that's important because we get to understand how the consumer is actually interacting with the property in the way that it was intended. And we also get to understand our design choices, how those impact management. So are service yards large enough? Is the MEP working the way it should be? How are we managing vertical movement of consumers or customers? These are all critical to the design process as we continue to develop. Village Market, for example, is moving into now the 8th phase of development. And so it's been an ongoing process over the last 30 years. And we've constantly had to refine the design aspects to suit growing trends and changes in the consumer's experience. So about 10 years ago, because based on feedback, we had to make a lot of changes to just accessibility around for prams and for wheelchairs, just to make a better user experience. And we saw that immediately reflect in the kind of buyer support and consumer experience that was coming in. Ultimately, with buildings, your reputation is everything, is your brand. And so we've just chosen to have a direct level of management in retail, in residential, and even hospitality. But I would say that it's not something that I would say everybody can do. You need to invest in people. You need to invest in systems. It's not that it's just you avoid paying a 5 or 3% fee. That you would keep it in-house. For us, it's actually having that direct interaction, that real-time feedback loop. Data is very important for us, so actually controlling the data and using it to just enhance the experience, and also being involved in our tenants' experiences and our hotel guests' experiences. So we're giving part of our story, and we're understanding what their requirements and needs and overall journey has been.
That's really interesting. So maybe you've quashed my in-house versus outsourced, because it's really about the quality and how it's done, and whether there is an asset management approach and a value creation approach. Philip, from your side, when you're valuing, do you see a difference when you're valuing, whether it's done externally, professionally, or internally, or is it just on the quality?
I would say it's a mixed bag, but it's not even on both sides. I think for most properties under institutional, and firms, agencies like ourselves, like Knight Frank, you find them in a better condition, better managed, better maintained, proper records in place, because of course the agent has a duty of care to the landlord, and they are working every day to ensure that they exceed expectations with the landlord. On the other side, we have a couple of owners, if I would highlight, Village Market as a good example. I think Excellerate Center as well, where you have in-house teams that are excellent. And like he said, because we've had the experience of interacting with them from other service lines, is they have heavily invested in their human capital. Unfortunately, for most others, that has not been the case. And a couple of years back in Nairobi, we had very many buildings, especially in the CBD. When you'd go value, you'd find, the descendants of the person who initiated the building, managing it. They are not keen on ensuring that all tenants have leases. So you have a lot of controlled tenancies. You have maintenance issues because they're not allocating funds as they should be. And in very sorry circumstances, we've even had the local authority in the Nairobi City County government clamp some of the buildings because someone somewhere didn't think it was prudent to pay something as simple as the land rates. So I think the people who are managed by firms perform way better than those who do it internally, especially if those who do it internally are doing it from a point of not having good knowledge of how to go about it. Yeah.
Thanks, Philip. And before we go to the floor for some questions, which would be great to give them 5 minutes, Ilze.
Sorry, Ryan.
That's right.
And Hooman, forgive me for asking you this or actually explaining this, but the other property management agencies can thank me later. The property management fee of, you mentioned 4, 5%, whatever that percentage is actually recoverable through service charge. So we shouldn't be costing you anything as property managers. And when you hire us as property managers, we will ensure that we will look at service charge and make sure that it's not inflated with that 4 to 5%. At the same time, not compromising on services. So we effectively manage that. And we at CBRE look at expense to income ratios all the time, and we report to the owners and asset managers on that. So I just wanted to make that point because I have the opportunity, which I seldom have, so thank you.
No, I think she's right. I mean, the only thing that I would say is that at the end of the day, nobody's going to care more about the business than the business owner, right? Because that's ultimately what it comes down to. So if the capacity is there, and I appreciate everything Philip said, but if the capacity is there, if the care is there, if the resources are in the company are available, and the owners are willing to invest and look at it as an operating business, not just as a passive building, that again you just have to keep the lights on, then I think there's an opportunity for an owner to maintain the management. But we're also seeing more hybrid solutions coming in place, where a group like ours, specifically on the Century City side, is now moving more into asset management as a high-level management of value for owners, both for ourselves and for other owners. And then we will still incorporate a facility manager and a professional property manager, and in some cases even a hospitality manager. So you might have 3 or 4 layers now that can work as a mesh and still work with an owner. So it's not just one or the other. I think that more and more there's going to be piecemeal solutions that we can pick, and we can actually come to a professional management team just for facility management because they're so efficient there. But we still might maintain tenant management, or we still might maintain, the front desk hotel management aspect.
Yeah. Ryan, I've got the roving mic. If you want to take questions.
Yeah. Let's see if there's anyone that has any questions this early in the morning. And if there aren't any questions, there is.
Thank you so much, Malcolm Horn from Broll. I think, Hooman, you touched on what I was going to raise. I think the traditional model of property management, where it's one fee and you take all of the services, is long outdated. I think the market's moved far beyond that. And I think there's more hybrid models that are coming into the market, more supplementary models that activate owners and asset managers to be more empowered to make quicker decisions. And we're seeing that trend across the continent. I'm sure it's going to be here as well.
Value add from the floor.
Okay, fantastic. I think, any other questions?
Morning. Peter Stokes from DHK Architects. Just interested in this facilities asset management and taking a longer view on the value of assets and property. As a designer, we want to do as much as we can up front, but we often don't see the tail end of a property once it's been built and we've handed over the keys and say goodbye. So how does one sort of bring that property management value back into the design phase to look at the fabric of the building, the MEP, the future proofing of technology? So how does the CapEx and OpEx equation sort of work out for you?
Can I maybe answer that first and then open it up? I think one thing that we're seeing is the value of early stage consultancy and actually designing for the operation. Quite often we see design for construction cost. And we want to make sure everything is built for a certain amount, but how is that asset going to perform 10 years down the line? Have we put the bathrooms in the right place? Is there a management office? These sorts of things. Have we got the right equipment that's, as you say, going to have longevity? So we're seeing a shift where developers are starting to engage with property managers, facility managers during the design process. I think that's quite key. I don't know if anyone has anything to add.
I think we've made a lot of mistakes in not including the property management hat and even facility management hats in our products or our properties at an early stage. We've had to come back and correct them when it's very difficult, very expensive. So managing security, for example, which is quite specific to this region. It's becoming a global issue, but it is quite specific. So with our latest phase of the mall, we allowed an additional 10 access points into the mall because that's better for our customer experience. But it means 10 additional security points that we now have to man, and that's become a very big headache. And so, not including the property management thinkers and consultants at that very early stage of design actually is a big problem. And now moving into our next phase, it's actually they're sitting at the table with us. It's still part of our team, but again, we can pull on now global resources. We can use data, technology, and our own experience, and hopefully do it right this time.
Thank you for those questions. Just the last point now, Philip, as you sit on the Matrix as chair of the Matrix committee for RICS, you're obviously interacting with a lot of the students. I know you run a conference every year with 500 plus students. Are students seeing property management as a viable path, career path? And how does the future look?
Yes, they are looking at PM as a viable path for them to take matters their careers. And how we've drawn to this conclusion is when we have the conferences, for example, and we have breakout sessions at the end of the day where people in different service lines talk to the students, and the students voluntarily go to a particular corner where, say, property management or valuation is being discussed. You get a good number of them who are actually interested in listening to those who are practicing property management to get to understand more about it. And even when they're applying for internships, for example, like as is the case right now because they're about to close for the long holidays, you realize they're very specific that my bias would be property management, which is quite encouraging. And in conclusion, I would also say when you have a view of their socials, especially LinkedIn, you get to see some even set themselves apart from the pack. For example, there's a student we had at the conference from JQuat third year who's developed a whole software that runs property management, and he put it out there, gave everyone back-end credentials, and told us criticize it, and I thought that was very forward-thinking. Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting discussion today. Property management, it touches on, it affects every stakeholder, whether it's the landlord, whether it's the tenants themselves. They want their properties to be managed, the leasing managed well. whether it's investors into institutional investment, it touches every element of real estate. So it'd be great to do some more debates around this at upcoming events. But thank you very much to the panelists, to Hooman, to Ilze, to Philip for your time today. Thank you.